What if a simple morning habit could change the way your body handles belly fat? In today's video titled, "What Happens to Your Belly Fat If You Walk on an Empty Stomach Every Morning?" We're going to unpack a question that sounds simple but is rarely explained correctly from a physiological perspective. Many people believe that walking before breakfast automatically melts belly fat. But the truth isn't hidden in motivational slogans, it's rooted in hormones, metabolic signals, and your body's energy state the moment you wake up. When you step outside in a fasted state, your insulin is low. Your glycogen stores have been partially depleted overnight. And your body faces a fuel decision. Will it rely on sugar, or will it begin mobilizing stored fat? More importantly, why do some people see noticeable results while others experience almost none? In this video, we'll break down insulin dynamics, glycogen metabolism, cortisol regulation, and exercise intensity, all grounded in real human physiology, not exaggerated promises. If you want to truly understand what's happening inside your body and apply it intelligently rather than blindly experimenting, stay with me until the end and make sure to subscribe for more science-based explanations delivered in a clear and practical way. When you open your eyes in the morning, before even thinking about your first meal, your body is already in a metabolic state very different from the rest of the day. After 8–10 hours without food, insulin levels drop to a low baseline. This is crucial because insulin is the hormone that determines whether your body is in storage mode or release mode. When insulin is high, the body prioritizes storing energy and suppresses fat release from adipose tissue. But when insulin is low, a biological door begins to open. Lipolysis, the breakdown of stored triglycerides into free fatty acids, is allowed to proceed more freely. Enzymes such as hormone-sensitive lipase operate more effectively, mobilizing fatty acids into the bloodstream to be used as fuel. At the same time, liver glycogen stores have been partially depleted overnight to maintain stable blood glucose for the brain and vital organs. This does not mean you have completely run out of glucose, but your body is no longer in a post-meal, sugar-abundant state. The combination of lower insulin and moderately reduced glycogen creates a more flexible metabolic environment. The body gradually shifts toward using fat as a supplementary fuel source, especially when paired with gentle physical activity. However, it is important to clarify one point: simply waking up does not automatically mean you are burning significant amounts of fat. You do not lose fat merely because you fasted overnight, but you are at a favorable starting point. Think of it as a car already shifted into the right gear before climbing a hill. Your body is primed to mobilize fat if an additional signal demands energy. That signal is movement. When you begin walking before breakfast, your energy demand increases. In a state of low insulin and limited readily available glucose, your body must mobilize more fatty acids from adipose tissue to meet that demand. This is why several studies have observed higher rates of fat oxidation during fasted exercise compared to fed exercise. But this is also where we must transition into a deeper layer of analysis. Burning more fat during the activity itself does not automatically guarantee long-term fat loss. The more important question involves total energy balance and hormonal adaptation across the entire day. And that is where we now move into examining what truly happens when you continue activity in a fasted state, and how that influences long-term belly fat reduction. So, what actually happens when you step outside and walk before breakfast? At the physiological level, your body constantly operates using two primary fuel sources: glucose and stored fat. After eating, especially a carbohydrate-containing breakfast, glucose becomes the preferred energy source. Insulin rises to shuttle glucose into cells. And during this period, there is little need for the body to mobilize fat. This is entirely normal. The body will always use the most readily available fuel first. However, when you walk before eating, the context changes significantly. Blood glucose availability is lower. Insulin remains at a baseline level, and liver glycogen stores are not as abundant as they would be post-meal. When energy demand increases due to movement, the body cannot rely heavily on immediate glucose. It must seek an alternative fuel source. At this point, fatty acids are mobilized from adipose tissue and released into the bloodstream to supply working muscles. This process is referred to as increased fat oxidation in the fasted state. Several studies comparing fasted versus fed exercise have observed higher rates of fat utilization in the fasted group. Mechanistically, this makes sense. Low insulin allows lipolysis to proceed more freely, and muscular energy demand encourages the use of circulating fatty acids. However, this is where the complexity begins. Burning more fat during a 30–45 minute walk does not automatically translate into greater long-term fat loss. The human body is adaptive. If you burn slightly more fat in the morning but compensate by eating more later due to increased hunger, overall energy balance may remain unchanged. Alternatively, if you unconsciously reduce total daily movement because you feel fatigued, the initial metabolic advantage may be neutralized. Moreover, the body does not evaluate fuel usage moment by moment alone. It responds to total energy balance across 24 hours and over consecutive days. This explains why some individuals experience noticeable changes from this habit, while others see minimal results. The difference lies in the broader context: diet quality, sleep patterns, stress levels, and long-term consistency. Therefore, saying that fasted walking increases fat burning is accurate in the short-term physiological sense. But the more important question is whether that temporary increase is sustained and translated into meaningful fat reduction. To answer that, we must look deeper into how the body regulates hormones, insulin sensitivity, and daily energy balance, because belly fat reduction is not the result of a single moment, but the accumulation of consistent metabolic conditions over time. To understand why belly fat often feels stubborn, even when overall weight decreases, we need to examine the biology of visceral fat, abdominal fat, particularly fat surrounding internal organs, is not identical to fat stored in the arms or thighs. It has a different density of hormone receptors and responds more strongly to metabolic signals such as insulin and cortisol. These two hormones play central roles in determining whether the body stores or mobilizes energy. First, insulin. When you frequently consume refined carbohydrates or snack repeatedly throughout the day, insulin tends to remain elevated for extended periods. Insulin does more than shuttle glucose into cells. It also sends a storage signal. Energy is available. Store it. In abdominal fat tissue, this signal can be particularly pronounced. The abdominal region has a high sensitivity to insulin, making it a preferred storage site when insulin spikes occur repeatedly. Over time, repeated high-low insulin fluctuations may contribute to reduced insulin sensitivity, creating a cycle that makes it increasingly difficult for the body to mobilize stored fat. The second factor is cortisol, the stress hormone. Cortisol is not inherently harmful. It helps you wake up in the morning and respond to challenges. However, when stress is chronic, sleep is insufficient, or training is excessively intense, cortisol levels can remain elevated for longer than normal. Visceral fat is especially sensitive to cortisol. Prolonged high cortisol levels are associated with a greater tendency to accumulate fat around the abdomen compared to other regions. This explains why individuals under chronic stress may notice increasing waistlines even without dramatically increasing calorie intake. So what makes fasted walking interesting in this context? First, in the fasted morning state, insulin is already low. By engaging in light movement instead of immediately eating, you extend the duration of low insulin levels. This supports continued lipolysis and reduces the immediate storage signal. Second, moderate intensity activity, especially outdoors, with natural light exposure, can help regulate the stress axis, support circadian rhythm alignment, and reduce baseline cortisol levels throughout the day. Unlike high-intensity training, which may sharply elevate cortisol, brisk walking tends to produce a more balancing effect. The key point is this: you are not merely burning fat during the 30–45-minute walk. You are influencing the overall hormonal environment of your body. When insulin fluctuations become less extreme and cortisol is better regulated, the conditions that favor abdominal fat accumulation are reduced. Belly fat does not disappear from a single walk. But when the hormonal environment stabilizes over days and weeks, the body becomes more capable of mobilizing and utilizing visceral fat. It is this improvement in the physiological environment, rather than simply higher calorie burn, that makes fasted walking a strategy worth considering. After understanding the hormonal mechanisms and the role of the fasted state, the next practical question becomes, how long do you actually need to walk for it to matter metabolically? Many people wake up, walk around for 5 minutes, and believe they have activated fat burning. But physiologically speaking, 5 minutes is rarely enough to produce meaningful metabolic change. The body requires time to transition from a resting state into a more energy-demanding one. During the first few minutes of walking, your body primarily uses readily available blood glucose and some remaining muscle glycogen. Heart rate takes time to stabilize at a level high enough to stimulate fat oxidation enzymes. The shift from primarily glucose utilization toward increased fatty acid use does not happen instantly. It requires sustained, steady activity. This is why duration becomes a critical factor. Many exercise physiologists suggest that approximately 30–45 minutes of moderate activity in a fasted state provides sufficient time for the body to enter and maintain a higher fat oxidation phase. This time frame allows heart rate to rise moderately, blood flow to muscles to increase, and enzymes involved in fat metabolism to operate more effectively. While not an absolute rule for everyone, this range is commonly associated with more noticeable metabolic benefits compared to very short sessions. However, intensity matters just as much as duration. If the walk is too easy, heart rate may not increase enough to create a meaningful energy demand, limiting metabolic impact. On the other hand, if you push too hard in a fasted state, for example, sprinting or performing high-intensity interval training, the body may respond with a significant cortisol spike. A sharp rise in cortisol can lead to fatigue, impair recovery, and potentially counteract the hormonal balance you are trying to improve. The sweet spot lies in moderate intensity. A simple practical guide is the talk test. You can still speak in short sentences, but your breathing is noticeably heavier than at rest. You feel engaged, but not exhausted. This zone is often informally described as fat oxidation friendly, where the body tends to derive a higher proportion of its energy from fat, particularly when insulin levels are low. Ultimately, the most important factor is not achieving a perfect minute count or heart rate number, but maintaining a routine you can repeat consistently. A steady 40-minute walk each morning will likely create a greater cumulative effect than an occasional intense session that is unsustainable. In metabolism, consistency and stability often outperform extremes. By now, You understand why the fasted morning state creates a favorable metabolic window for fat utilization. However, there is one common mistake that can eliminate this advantage within minutes, and most people do not even realize they are making it. That mistake is consuming a small amount of sugar before walking a sweetened coffee, a glass of fruit juice, or even a small biscuit just to take the edge off. Subjectively, this may feel insignificant. Physiologically, it changes everything. Even a modest rise in blood glucose is enough to trigger an insulin response. As discussed earlier, insulin functions as a metabolic switch. When insulin rises, even moderately, lipolysis is suppressed. The enzymes responsible for releasing fatty acids from adipose tissue become less active. The body shifts back toward prioritizing glucose as its primary fuel source. This means your walk is no longer occurring in a true fasted metabolic state. You may still be moving, but hormonally, you have transitioned into a fed state. In this condition, the proportion of energy derived from fat is typically lower compared to when insulin remains at baseline levels. This explains why some individuals report that morning walking didn't change anything. The issue is often not the walking itself, but the disruption of the hormonal conditions required for enhanced fat oxidation. If your goal is to maximize the metabolic advantage of fasted activity, the solution is surprisingly simple. Before walking, keep intake minimal. A glass of water to rehydrate after an overnight fast is entirely reasonable. Proper hydration supports circulation and metabolic processes. If you need alertness, black coffee without sugar is commonly used. Caffeine can slightly enhance fat oxidation and energy levels without significantly stimulating insulin, provided you avoid added sugar or sweet syrups. The key takeaway is not extreme restriction, but understanding the underlying mechanism. Even a small amount of sugar can alter your hormonal environment. Once you recognize this, you can intentionally protect the metabolic advantage you are trying to create. In metabolism, seemingly minor details often determine the overall outcome. The most compelling aspect of fasted morning walking is not confined to the 30-45 minutes of movement itself. Its real value lies in what happens afterward throughout the rest of the day. The human body does not function in isolated moments. It operates through regulatory cycles that extend across hours. When you engage in light activity while insulin is low in the morning, you are not only burning fat during the walk, you are sending a positive metabolic signal that influences the hours that follow. First, consider insulin sensitivity. Muscle activity enhances the ability of cells to take up glucose with less reliance on insulin. During a morning walk, your muscles use up part of their glycogen stores. Later, when you consume carbohydrates, your muscles are more prepared to absorb glucose efficiently. This can reduce the magnitude of post-meal blood sugar spikes and limit excessive insulin surges. Over time, these repeated, subtle improvements contribute to a more stable metabolic environment. Second, there is the stress component, light movement, especially when paired with natural morning sunlight, helps regulate the body's stress axis. Cortisol naturally rises in the morning to promote alertness. When you expose yourself to daylight and engage in gentle activity, you reinforce your circadian rhythm. This helps anchor cortisol patterns more predictably throughout the day, rather than allowing erratic fluctuations driven by poor sleep or chronic stress. As discussed earlier, better regulated cortisol means a less favorable environment for abdominal fat accumulation. Additionally, this habit creates a psychological ripple effect. Starting the day with intentional movement reinforces healthy behavioral patterns. After walking and experiencing steady energy levels, you may be more inclined to make balanced food choices later. This extends beyond physiology into behavior and in long-term metabolic outcomes. Daily habits often matter more than short bursts of extreme effort. The key point is this: fasted walking is not a magical fat-burning hack. There is no miracle in a single morning session. But when you optimize the system, insulin dynamics, glycogen utilization, cortisol regulation, and circadian alignment, you create a chain of favorable conditions that compound over time. And when those small optimizations are repeated consistently, day after day, they gradually translate into visible changes around the waist. Not dramatic, not instantaneous, but sustainable. Here is the most important reality that many people overlook. Fat does not disappear in a week. The body does not function like an on-off switch, nor does it respond to diet today. Flat stomach, tomorrow logic. Fat loss is a slow, cumulative biological process that depends on a consistently repeated hormonal environment. If you expect dramatic change after a few morning walks, you may feel disappointed. But if you understand the mechanism and allow time for adaptation, the story shifts entirely. Think of fat as an ice block. It does not explode when exposed to warmth. It melts gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. A single fasted morning walk may only mobilize a small amount of fatty acids. One isolated day rarely makes a visible difference. But when you repeat that behavior 5 or 6 times per week, maintaining lower insulin levels, more stable cortisol, and avoiding the interruption of added sugar, you create a consistent metabolic environment. Over 4–8 weeks, that accumulation becomes meaningful, not because you are burning fat at super speed, but because you are steadily reducing storage signals while enhancing the conditions that favor fat mobilization. A shrinking waistline is rarely the result of one exceptional session. It is usually the product of 30 consistent sessions that were not disrupted by small habits that spike insulin each morning. This is the power of consistency in physiology. The key is to avoid breaking the chain, adding sugar to coffee daily, snacking before walking, chronic sleep deprivation, or excessively intense training that elevates cortisol can neutralize the small advantage you are building. The body responds to the overall pattern, not to isolated moments. The goal is not daily perfection, but maintaining a relatively stable hormonal environment most of the time. After 1 month, you may not see a dramatically flat stomach, but you may notice clothes fitting slightly better, steadier energy, reduced cravings. After 2 months, those small changes become more visible. This is the difference between strategies driven by emotional expectations and those grounded in physiology. One chases instant results, the other builds sustainable systems. The most important reality is this: fat melts slowly, but it melts reliably when the right conditions are maintained. And if each morning requires only a pair of shoes, quiet time, and consistency, you are investing in a change your body can sustain long-term. So if you're looking for a rapid fat-burning hack, morning fasted walking probably won't shock you with dramatic results in 7 days. But if you're looking for a sustainable, low-risk habit that's easy to maintain and grounded in real physiology, this is a powerful place to start. Here's the practical advice. Don't turn it into something extreme. Don't push yourself to exhaustion while fasting. Don't sabotage the advantage with sugar right before you walk. Instead, walk 30–45 minutes at a moderate pace. Do it before breakfast. Drink water or black coffee, no sugar. Stay consistent for at least 4–8 weeks. Think of it as a gentle metabolic reset each morning. A small signal to your body that today is about stability, not extremes, not chaotic insulin spikes. Your body doesn't need shock tactics. It needs the right environment repeated long enough. If you appreciate science-based explanations that help you truly understand your body instead of blindly following trends, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next videos. Here, we don't chase hype. We explain mechanisms. And sometimes, the biggest transformation begins with one simple morning walk.